Okay, so this part of the tutorial will be devoted to setting up these spinners in Android. It's a bit of a process, so we're going to have to first write a function each to set the spinner up. So each of these functions will basically just create what we call an adapter, which is just going to be a list that contains basically the list of missing variables. We're going to feed that into the missing variable spinner, and then we have the list of calculations. We're going to feed that into the calculations spinner. So this is just populating these spinners with the appropriate lists. And we're also going to write functions to handle these spinner selections. So when an item is chosen from a spinner, we're going to basically have something happen. Alright, so now we're going to implement the functions that will set the spinners up. So that means populating them with the lists that we created up here. And we're also going to start declaring the methods that will handle the spinner choices. These are just going to be handlers that when an item is selected from the spinner will do something, but we're not necessarily going to fill them in just yet. Okay? So now we're going to look outside of the onCreate function. So that's going to be after this curly brace here. Just going to give it a couple of lines. And the first one we're going to do is we're going to create this function called set missing variable spinner. It's going to be a void, so set missing variable spinner. And this is just going to set up the spinner that will contain the missing variables. Okay, so this is a not very intuitive process, so just bear with me while I do this. The first thing we have to do is we have to create this variable called adapter, and it's basically going to be a new array adapter. So it's going to take in an array of strings, and we're going to give it some parameters. So the first is going to be this. And then we're going to give it, in fact, first of all, I'm going to go up to the top. So this is something that you might want to start getting used to. Under these using dependencies, we're just going to include using system. And the reason we do that is because there's a lot of built-in functions that we'll be using, and I don't want to call system dot whatever every single time. Okay, so this is going to be Android dot. This one is going to be resource.layout, and we're going to focus on a simple spinner item, not the drop-down one, just a simple spinner item, and it's going to contain the list of missing variables. So basically what this is doing is it's creating this array adapter, and it's going to take in a bunch of strings, and basically it's going to be each thing is going to be a simple spinner item, and it's going to take in our list of missing variables as parameters. So this is just creating a list that will be contained in our spinner. Well, the missing variable spinner to be specific. Okay, and then we have to do adapter dot drop down set drop down view resource. And we're going to call Android.layout or .resource.layout. And this is going to be simple spinner item. This one's going to be the drop-down item this time. Okay? And so what this is doing is it's setting our adapter to... This line actually isn't necessary, but I think it makes the spinner look nicer in the end, so why not include it, right? It's just one extra line. So again, it's just setting the drop-down resource, so this is going to be our list of drop-down items to be simple spinner drop-down items, okay? And then we're going to, last but not least, set the missing variable spinner dot adapter to be our adapter. So basically this adapter is going to so that the adapter for the missing variable spinner, which is this one here, is going to be equal to the adapter that we created here. So basically this function is just populating our spinner with the list of missing variables, okay? So again, not very intuitive. I suggest you kind of take another look at this and figure out how exactly to set up a spinner, because this is the way you do it, okay? And our next step is going to be the other spinner, which is going to be the list of calculation spinner. So this one's going to be called a void This is going to be a void. This is going to be set calculation spinner. Calculation spinner. And again, I'm just setting these up so we can call another adapter, and because these are local variables, they only exist within the scope of the function, so it's fine to call them. And again, we're going to do the same thing. It's going to be an array adapter, and in fact, because it's exactly the same thing, I'm just going to copy this code right from here and paste it. And so it's going to be string, yep. The only difference is that we're going to contain the list of calculations instead, and this is going to be the calculation spinner.adapter. Okay, so I just copied and pasted it exactly. The only two things I changed were it now contains a list of calculations, and we're calling it on the calculation spinner, because again, we're setting up the calculation spinner in this function. Okay, so now we've set these two methods up, so we've set the spinner methods up, we might as well go ahead and just implement the handlers. So what we're going to do is I'm going to put the handler right for the missing variable spinner right after this one, and so I'm going to call this void choose from missing variable spinner, because that's exactly what we're going to be doing when we call this function. And basically what it's going to do is we're going to call this, so once the missing variable spinner is accessed and an item from it is accessed, so we're going to call missing variable spinner.item selected. So this is when an item is selected. We're going to do plus equals we're going to do plus equals a delegate. So basically this is saying when an item from this spinner is selected, we're going to do whatever is in those curly braces there. And that is first going to change a variable which we'll have to add. We'll call this one variable to calculate. So this one is going to be basically, this is going to tell us which variable is missing. Okay, so this is just going to be a string, and in fact I'm going to add the definition up here. String variable to calculate. So this is just going to contain the string that is the result of whatever we've chosen. So then we can use that string to determine some other stuff in different methods. So this is going to be variable to calculate is equal to the missing variable spinner, and that's going to be the selected item. Okay, so the selected item was just chosen from the list of the drop-down menu, and we're going to have to convert that to a string. And there we go. So this line is just saying that we have a string that's a variable to calculate, and it's going to be whatever the selected item we have right now. Okay? So that we can then determine which set of calculations to use, because that will determine, again, which set of calculations to use, because that depends entirely on which variable is missing. Okay? And then we want to update the text, so the missing variable spinner text.text. So we want the text that's going to be this thing up here. We want that to display whatever is on our spinner. So we're just going to have that equal to whatever variable to calculate has become. Okay? And then we're going to call the choose from. Oh, we haven't actually started the choose from missing or choose from calculation spinner, so I'm just going to add in a comment here. It's going to be a to-do. In fact, it's not even going to be a to-do, it's just going to call choose from calculation spinner. Okay, so this just ensures that the reason we're calling it here is that once this function is done and we've chosen an item, then we can choose an item from the calculation spinner. And let's go ahead and set that up. So it's going to be choose from calculation spinner. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to say calculation spinner dot item selected. Again, exactly the same as before. So it's basically saying when an item is selected from the calculation spinner this time, we're going to set another variable, which is going to be a calculation to use. and that's going to be another string. So this string is just going to contain the results of the item we've selected. So calculation to use is going to be equal to the calculation choice spinner dot selected item, and then convert it to a string. Okay, so this is just basically saying that once we've selected an item, the item we've selected converted to a string is going to be stored in calculation to use. And again, we're going to use that to help determine which calculation to use and what our missing variables will be. And then we're going to say the calculation spinner text, it's the fourth one there, dot text, if I can type, is going to be equal to the calculation to use. Okay, and I'm just going to go ahead and save this, and now we can call it from here. So we can call choose from calculation spinner. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and save that, and alright, so this is the end of this part, but I'm just going to recap what we did. So we set up the two spinners first of all. We set first a missing variable spinner. So this line just created what we call an adapter. It was an array adapter, and it contains a list of missing variables. Then we set our, this line made it look nicer, and this line was just basically saying the missing variable spinner, which is the one that we've added to our layout, is going, and the adapter for that is going to be equal to this list that we've set out. So we're just populating the list of, the missing variable spinner with this list of variables, and we're doing the same thing in the calculations one, except with the list of calculations. Then these functions here, and in fact, we should probably call them in the code before I forget, so set missing variable spinner, and this just sets them up as soon as this just ensures that these are set up as soon as the code runs, or rather as soon as the app runs, and those are just in the onCreate method here. Yeah, so then the choose from missing variable spinner is saying once an item is selected, we want to do this, and we're just assigning the variable to calculate to be the item selected. We're going to change the text to display which item is selected, and then we're going to call this next function, which is going to choose from the calculation spinner. So same thing pretty much. We're going to set the calculation to use to be the item selected, and then we're going to change the text to display which item is selected. Now after this, we're going to call another function, but that is for the next part. So again, this was just setting up the spinners and setting up the spinner handlers. In this part of the tutorial, we set up the spinners in Android. So this involved 4 functions total. There were 2 functions to set the spinners up, so 1 each, and there were 2 functions to handle the selections. And again, there was 1 each, so 1 to set up the spinner and 1 to handle the spinner selection, and we did 1 for each of the 2 spinners. So by now you should be able to set up a spinner successfully in Android, and so that involves setting it, so populating it with the list, as well as implementing the handlers, and dictate what will happen when an item is selected.